So for your literature review, you will need to do several things. First of all, you'll need to read 5 of your sources, and at least 3 of those sources need to be peer-reviewed scholarly articles. And you've already created a reference list. So you have 10 sources or 10 references that you're using for this, that you've used for this research project. You used 5 of them to complete your annotated bibliography. You're going to use the other 5 to write your literature review. So if you only chose magazine articles, newspaper articles, or websites, you will need to go back and find 5 additional sources. To begin this, you need to go back and look at the reference list feedback that I gave you, and if needed, revise that reference list. That's the first thing that you'll need to do. So sorry. Okay, second thing that you'll need to do is read those 5 sources. As you're reading the sources, you're going to be looking for things that the sources have in common. So you're looking for information within the sources that is repeated from across the sources. Maybe 2 of the sources, 3 of the sources, or all 5 of the sources include information that is the same or very similar. Those are called themes. And then you're going to look for the methodology that the researchers used when creating this research study. And then thirdly, you're going to be looking for chronological aspects. Chronological meaning aspects that happened over time, chronos, time. So the most difficult thing that most students have understanding is the themes. And so that's why we're looking at this particular paper. So this particular paper looks, and this is a student's paper, a student who's completed this class at Philander Smith College. And the topic here was living with chronic illness. So you can see here the first thing that the student did was write an introduction that discusses chronic illness overall. And this student told me specifically what she's going to be discussing in the paper. The purpose of this study is to focus on physical chronic illnesses and mental chronic illnesses and the effects that it has on family communication, particularly surrounding the diagnosis of those illnesses. Then she told me why she chose family communication. And you can see here she talks about how family has a huge impact on the perception of illness, but that both mental and physical chronic illnesses are more complex than they're portrayed in the media, and so forth. Notice this citation here. According to Rosalind, 2009, several interviews and focus groups showed that family members lowered stress and are central to patient success. So that's the other thing that you need to do in this paper. You need to use citations from the 5 sources that you are reviewing. Otherwise, your paper is just your opinion. So you need to include information from those 5 sources, and you'll need to cite those sources, meaning you can paraphrase, you can summarize, and you can quote specific information from your sources. However, let me caution you, your paper cannot be one big long quote. That is called plagiarizing. Notice here, this student gave more information and told me why this study was important. Here's another citation here, and then she begins the literature review. So she's decided to look at this illness, chronic illness, from a physical standpoint and a mental standpoint, and she tells you, I'm going to compare the two. So the first thing she does is look at chronic physical illness, and within her sources, several of them deal with the effect or the impact that marriage has on chronic physical illness. So she dealt with that first. Notice this heading is over here on the left-hand side, and it's even, it's bolded and even with the left margin. Then she bolds the first theme, which is marriage, and then begins the discussion. Notice that each new paragraph is indented. This paper is also double-spaced. She's using a 12-point font in Times New Roman. She's also done a spell check. Here's her first citation right here. So she's telling me in this study, this is what these people found. Here in this study, this is what these people found as far as marriage and chronic illness, chronic physical illness is concerned. So that's one theme. Two of her sources, or three of her sources, there's the third one, Schuff and Sims, discuss the impact and the effect that marriage has on chronic physical illness. The second theme that she found was narratives. Narratives are the stories or the way that we look at something. And she found that several of her studies, one, two, three, talk about the narratives that surround physical illness. And then she just goes back and stresses this one here specifically, another citation. She cites it again right here. Then she points out that another of her studies actually contradicts that information, but it all has to do with the narratives that surround chronic physical illness. Those are two of the themes that she found as far as chronic physical illness is concerned. Then the next thing that she dealt with was chronic mental illness. Then again, marriage is one of the themes that she found here. The other thing is the parent-child relationship. Notice the citations that run throughout the paper. She's got one citation here by Perry, repeats some information from Perry's work, talks about Segren, and then also Schmeling and Jacobson, Segren again, and then looks at the parent-child relationship. That's the second theme that she found as far as chronic mental illness is concerned. And then notice here, she's got a citation here. Again, another citation. And notice how the first time she uses this citation by Richardson, if your citation has more than 3 authors, or if your paper has more than 3 authors, the first time you cite it, you list all of the authors' names and the date. The second time that you cite it, you just write Richardson et al. Notice the et does not have a period. That lets me know that there are other authors, but she didn't have to repeat it because she had listed them previously. So this is the second reference. Then here's another citation, and then she cites Richardson again, and then here's another citation. Okay, so then she has another one here. This has a lot of authors right there. So she lists all of them the first time, second time et al. So she's still dealing with the parent-child relationship and how it affects the chronic mental illness. The second thing, the methodology, and that's what I was discussing earlier. So she looked at all 5 of the sources that she used for this literature review and looked at what methods the researchers used to gather information. It was a qualitative method. And she discusses that, a non-random sampling strategy, okay? So this, the main thing that you're going to discuss in your paper are the themes, but this particular student spent a little bit more time talking about the methodology as well. Then that was it. She didn't have any chronological aspects that they talked about. So if it did have a chronological aspect, one of the things that she could point out is that maybe 2 or 3 of her studies did their research over 10 years, and this is the information that they found. Maybe the other 3 sources did their research over a 1-month period. So that would be chronological aspects that you would discuss, is that the authors studied the topic over a period of time, and these are the changes that they found. This is what they found at the beginning of the study, but by the end of the study, they had found this information. So you need to look at the chronological aspects as well. Then notice this student ends with her references. Notice how neat the references are. The first line of each one of the entries is even with the left-hand margin. The second line, and if there's a third or a fourth, is indented. Then there's DOIs. Notice there are no hyperlinks in her reference list. Notice the reference list is in alphabetical order, and it continues on. Now, this particular student used all 10 of her references for this paper. This is what I'm looking for when you all write your paper. I am looking for a paper. This paper happens to be 12 pages long. This literature review should be at least 5 pages in length. You cannot discuss 5 of your sources in a page. You should have at least 5 pages for this assignment. Don't skimp on this assignment. You need to read the 5 sources, and then you need to deal with the common aspects of the sources. Write a good introduction. Make sure that you spell check. Make sure that you've gone back and read what you wrote. Make sure that you include citations. And there are several ways to write citations. You have a handout about how to cite your work. So make sure that you read that. This literature review sample is online under handouts and lectures. Make sure that you read this. Again, there is no exception to the due date. I must caution you all, do not ask for an extension. This is the last assignment that you're going to turn in. I need to be able to read the literature review drafts and return those to you as quickly as possible so that you can then revise it, and your revision, the final literature review, that final version is going to be the last graded item that you have for this class. So make sure that you do a really good job, and make sure that you revise your reference list based on the information that I gave you. Make sure that you look at the sample of the reference list as well. I believe that's everything. Thank you so much.